on the book of Joshua. I tried to make it a bit larger today, so hopefully it's a bit easier to see. Right, so we were talking last week about prophecy, right? Basically a little bit about what makes someone a prophet. We know that it says that we don't think of Moshe as a prophet, but it says God spoke to him face to face, which is pretty much the experience of a prophet. And we know, of course, that Joshua was appointed in his lifetime so that you would have a smooth succession. Joshua has a very difficult task. They're on a few different fronts. Obviously, Moshe has been a epic leadership. He's following in his footsteps. Also, the whole kind of experience and situation of the Jewish people is going to change because they're going from the desert into the land of Israel. They're going to have to deal with the real world, building their homeland, very physical needs. We know, of course, many mitzvahs involve agriculture and physical things, and they have to conquer the land as well. They have to fight wars, and Joshua's going to have to oversee all of this. And in fact, Moshe says that you will enter the land with the people. God says to him, you will bring the people into the land. So at the end of the Chumash, we have the end of Moshe's life. He's pretty much working till his last day. It says that his sight didn't dim. He didn't lose his color. It says his, the exact phrase is his leicha, basically means his moisture. I guess it's like he didn't lose his color. He didn't sort of get all wrinkly. He basically kept his vigor and youth until his last day. Moshe dies, and immediately they're basically about to cross the Jordan. That happens very quickly after that. Now, let's have a look at the first few verses of chapter 1, then we'll talk a little bit about it. So I think I'll read because of the microphone situation. So it starts off, it was after the death of Moshe, the servant of the Lord, that God said to Joshua ben Yoshua ben Nun, he translates here as Moshe's minister. I guess he was his designated successor, as follows. Moshe Avdi Meis, Moshe my servant has died. Now get up and cross the Jordan, you and all this nation, to the land which I give the children of Israel. Sounds simple, but it's quite a tall order. He says, every place on which the soles of your feet will tread, I've given to you as I've spoken to Moshe. This is a famous phrase. Can't think of the phrase. Kaf rag tidrech, kaf rag lechem. Occurs in the Torah as well. It says wherever you will step, basically, will be your land. From the desert and the Lebanon to the great river, the Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea westward shall be your boundary. Now, I didn't look up a map of this, but off the record, it's a bit ironic. You know the whole conspiracy theory about the Israeli flag? Anyone know the conspiracy theory about the two lines? That it's the Euphrates and the Jordan, and that Israel wants to occupy all the land in between. So this from the river to the sea business actually occurs here. As far as I know, that's quite a large chunk of land, far more than the modern day state of Israel. I have to look on an actual map. And Hashem promises him, no man shall stand up before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moshe, I shall be with you. It's interesting because it says there never arose a prophet like Moshe, but God says, I will be with you in the same way as with Moshe. I will not loosen my grip, nor will I abandon you. So he basically has a promise from Hashem. And next thing he says is chazak ve'ematz. Like we say chazak when it's chazek. Be strong and have courage. You will cause this nation to inherit the land that I've sworn to their ancestors to give to them. Be strong and courageous. Observe and do according to the Torah that Moshe commanded you. Do not stray to the right or left, and that you may succeed wherever you go. So there's an allusion here to the idea, which is a very modern day issue as well, that you don't win wars on might alone, you need Torah study as well. And he says to him, this book of the Torah shall not leave your mouth. You shall meditate therein day and night in order to observe, to do all that is written in it. Then you will succeed in all your ways and you will prosper. Did I not command you, be strong and have courage? Do not fear, do not be dismayed. The Lord is with you wherever you go. Okay, so there's a few themes there that basically Hashem says to him, don't worry, I'm looking out for you. He also says that this phrase chazak ve'ematz, like chazak, be strong. So it's quite a big bracha from God himself. He assures him that as long as he will do according to the Torah that he was given, and the words of Torah will never leave his mouth. So there's an obvious question, how are you supposed to do that when you're preparing for war? So we'll see later on. There is a time when Joshua possibly, I think was supposed to be studying more Torah than he was, and it gets addressed. But he says, as long as you're studying and you have the Torah basically with you as a leader, then you will succeed and you will prosper. Did I not say to you, be strong and have courage? Do not fear, do not be dismayed. The Lord is with you. Oh, hi, Graham, wherever you go. Okay. So Hashem is basically giving Joshua his marching orders, tells him that it's about strength of character from faith and belief in God, from doing mitzvot. That is the key to safety and security in the promised land and inheriting the promised land. Before we carry on, just look at the time scale of this for a moment, because this all happens extremely quickly. Sometimes you hear that I presume when a king dies also, you don't wait a year to appoint another king. They'll usually say that after the end of the mourning period, the next in line, the son usually will be crowned as king. You don't mess around.
Where's that?
Saying generally, like in the world today.
In
right?
this country, isn't it?
How long? Is it immediate?
I think
So in
it's
some
the
places,
same.
they'll wait till the mourning period is over. I would imagine that, unfortunately, a time of mourning is a great time to attack many countries because you'll have a vacuum of leadership. So what happens here? I think you're right. It may be immediate. Has to be. Because somebody constitutionally has to be head of state.
Princess Elizabeth, I think, was on a tour or somewhere.
Right.
Kenya or somewhere. And when she found out that her father was died.
Yeah, and then you hear about these like child kings that, suddenly one day they're king automatically because the father's died or something. You have it, of course, with heads of state as well. If anything happens to the president, the vice president immediately takes on the role. There's no, respect is one thing, but at the end of the day, you need someone in power. So we have an interesting situation. How long did they mourn for Moshe? 30 days. Right? He's a national leader. They mourned for 30 days. When did Moshe die? What date? Anyone remember?
Was it the 7th?
7th of Adar, right? Sidebar, that was also, of course, his birthday. And then when Haman was looking for a day to attack the Jews, and the lots fell on Adar, and he thought this is a good lucky month because it's the month that their leader died. So he made two fundamental mistakes. The first is that it was also Moshe's birthday, which is a mazel dika day, as I say in Yiddish. It's a lucky day for a person. And secondly, a yahrzeit, particularly of a tzaddik who lived till 120 years, is not necessarily a bad omen. On the contrary, it's a very holy day. So Haman was wrong, and he was proven wrong later on. But so Moshe dies 7th of Adar. If you count 30 days of Shloshim of mourning, that takes you to the 7th of Nisan, right, which is awfully close to Pesach. So it seems that Joshua's public role only took effect a month at the end of Shloshim. There were certain things that happened before that, because you have to carry on running the country. You can't just stop everything for a month. I know sometimes they do that. They have a week of national mourning. Everything closes. I was just reading an interesting biography of one of the rabbis in Thailand. When the king died, like everything closed for a week. You have national mourning. But certain things have to continue, which we'll see in a moment. But the official sort of takeover was 7th of Nisan. And we'll see. The 8th of Nisan, we'll see later on. The 8th of Nisan basically told the people what God had said. The 9th of Nisan, 8th of Nisan and 9th of Nisan, he tells them basically they're going to cross the Jordan. The 10th of Nisan, they cross the Jordan. So it's a very short time scale. And what happens after that, we'll see, is that they do 2 mitzvahs for the first time that they haven't done the whole time in the desert. Anyone know what they were? When you first hear this, it's quite shocking.
Oh, they have a bris.
One was having a bris, and the other is the Pesach offering, and they're probably linked. It says you can't bring the Pesach offering if you're uncircumcised. It seems, it's not mentioned in Torah explicitly, that they didn't perform the mitzvah of bris milah throughout the time in the desert, either because of conditions, that it was too dangerous, basically. A child needs to recover from a bris. You can't be traveling in the heat with all the sand everywhere and whatever. So they actually all had to have a bris, those that hadn't had it, which is basically everyone, the times of Joshua. So there's a lot going on in those first few weeks, right? Until now, they're in the desert, and the clouds gave them protection, and the food and drink basically was flowing plentifully. I know they complained about the menu, but the reality is the food fell from the sky, and now suddenly they're going to have to fight wars, and they're going to have a bris, which is painful, and they're going to have to start doing practical things, and they're going to have to get ready for a battle. They're going to cross the Jordan, etc., etc. So it's all going to get quite busy. Now, there's a few issues. First issue, who was the advanced party that was already there on the other side of the Jordan?
Oh, the tribe that Is it Reuben?
Sorry, not on the other side of the Jordan, on this side, but
On the
basically, yeah,
side.
right,
Is it Reuben?
right. So Gad, I can't remember if it's the East Bank or West Bank. I get mixed up.
East.
It must be the East Bank, yes, because the West Bank is closer to Israel. So the 2.5 tribes, you may recall, had already set up camp on the East Bank of the Jordan, which was actually not going to be part of their ancestral land, because they said, if you recall, we have lots of cattle and we need some land for grazing, and we basically like to take possession of the land early, and we're happy to have land on the outskirts. And if you recall, Moshe said somehow, this is going to demoralize the people, because the people will feel that you've broken with the rest of the nation. And there's a famous quote which has appeared on Israeli posters since then with regard to the arguments for and against Haredi population going to the army. Are your brothers going to go fight in the army and you're going to stay home? That's what Moshe says to Gad and Reuben and half of Manasseh. And they say, no, we give you our undertaking that when the time comes, when the rest of you catch up with us, and the time comes to cross the Jordan, we will lead the battle. And we will only come back to our relatively safe suburban existence once you've conquered the land. Says, we're not doing this to get out of any military campaign. We're going ahead. We're going to be basically just outside the land of Israel. That's where our land will be. And when the time comes to go and conquer the land of Israel, we will be at the forefront. So they promise that. So the next thing Joshua does is he commands the officers of the nation, and he says to them, go through the middle of the camp, command the nation, prepare provision for yourself, for in 3 days you will cross the Jordan to come and inherit the land the Lord your God is giving you to inherit. And to the Reubenites and the Gadites and half the tribe of Manasseh, so that's the 2.5 tribes, he said, remember the word that Moshe commanded you. The Lord is giving you rest and has given you this land. Your wives, your children, your cattle shall settle in the land that Moshe gave you on this side of the Jordan. But you, the warriors, shall cross over armed before your brothers and help them, until the Lord gives your brothers rest as he has given you, and they too shall inherit the land that the Lord gives them. Then you will return to the land of your inheritance, which Moshe gave you on this side of the Jordan towards the rising of the sun. So that, yes, sun rises in the east, yes, east bank, and you will inherit it. And they answered, saying, all you have commanded us we shall do, and wherever you send us we shall go. And I think the Hebrew is very similar to Nasev and Nishma. Whatever you told us, we will do. Just as we listened to Moshe, we will obey you. Only that the Lord should be with you as he was with Moshe. So basically, as long as God is with you, we will obey you. And God has already promised Joshua that he'll be with him. And finally, they say, every man that shall rebel against your words and will not listen to your commands, in all that you order him shall be put to death. Only be strong and have courage. Now, it sounds harsh, but we know that a deserter is very bad for morale. I don't know if in the First World War, they shot deserters, didn't they?
Yeah.
I don't know if they would do that anymore, but okay. So this is what we've got going on. So we've got the 2.5 tribes, sorry?
Probably not.
No. We've got 2.5 tribes who had gone on ahead, who are now basically camped outside the land. Interesting question. They would have probably had more intelligence because they're quite close to the border. So they should have known more about what's going on in the land of Israel. Now, before they can enter the land, what do you need in order to conduct a war?
Supply lines.
Supply lines. What else?
Intelligence.
Right? The most important commodity is information. You need intelligence. Okay. What's the track record of spying missions with the children of Israel?
Up to this point.
1-0, lost 1. Yes, right? 0-1, or however you express it. They did very badly the last time they sent a spy mission. But those who've read the Haftorah of Shalach Lecha will know that, of course, Joshua does send spies. But he does it very differently. We'll see how in a minute. Before we do that, so just to go over chapter 1. So you've got God giving him basically his promise that he'll be with him as long as he follows the Torah and the right way of doing things. He tells the officers and the 2.5 tribes to prepare for victory, promises them that they will inherit the land, and they basically say back to him, as long as you have God on your side, then we are very happy with that. All this is happening around the beginning of Nisan. So sometimes things in the Bible take a year, 2 years, 40 years, 100 years. This is all very quick, right? Moshe's gone immediately. Everything's changing. So how are we doing for time? Got a bit of time. Okay, so chapter 2 now. Joshua sends spies.
12 minutes.
Okay, I'm okay for time. We'll go to about 9:30. Everyone else okay for time?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to look at the spies now. Very brave of Joshua to send spies, given what went wrong the previous time. So we'll have a look at what he does, and then we'll talk about it. Chapter 2. Joshua, son of Nun, sent 2 men out of Shittim to spy secretly. Now, why was it secret? Well, one reason is it was probably during the Shloshim, so things weren't going on publicly. The other reason is because we know what happens when they made a public spectacle the last time round. Anyway, let's see what he said. He doesn't tell us who they were, by the way. And he said, go see the land and Jericho. Jericho was known as the key, the Mana'ah, which means a lock to the land of Israel. Like, certain places that if a certain place falls in battle, you know that basically you'll conquer the rest of that country. I'm trying to think of examples. We had it during World War II, particular key strategic, what was it, Sudetenland? And no, that was where they declared independence, wasn't it? Where they declared, where the Nazis occupied was the Sudetenland.
Where the Germans occupied the German part of Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, there's certain key parts that trigger things because they're strategic places. I mean, even Gibraltar and sort of the Falklands, they're very small places, but they're strategic. So Jericho is very strategic. It was known as the Mina'al, I think, which means a lock. Basically, the key to unlocking the land of Israel. So it was the strategic entry point. And they went and they came to the house of an innkeeper, which is a nice way of describing her. She's actually described as a zonah in the Tanakh. A zonah in modern Hebrew is basically a nice, not very nice way of, if you would call someone a bitch in English, which is extremely rude. So a zonah basically means that. And when people say ben zonah, it basically means son of a. So it's not a very nice term. Biblically, it means usually a lady of the night. Interestingly, though, it could also mean just an innkeeper, because when we make a bracha on cake, you say Brahmanema zonot. So the word zonah could also mean just someone who provides sustenance, but it usually has the more euphemistic meaning. It's not even euphemistic; it's quite explicit. So Rahab, we'll call her Rahab, her Hebrew name. She had an inn. Now, and the king of Jericho heard that these men had come here from the children of Israel to search the land. And he sent a message to Rahab saying, bring forth the men who have come to you, that have entered your house, for they've come to search out the land. Now she had taken the two men and hidden them. And she said, yes, they came to me. I didn't know where they came from. And it was time to close the gate at darkness. And they went out. I don't know where they went. Chase them quickly. You will overtake them. Meanwhile, she brought them up to the roof. She hid them with stalks of flax that she had arranged upon the roof. I don't know what stalks of flax look like, but it's some kind of linen-y plant, isn't it? So I guess some kind of material. So basically she hid them on the roof, which presumably was a very dangerous thing to do. They pursued them in the direction of the Jordan to the fords, and of course they didn't find them. And as soon as they'd gone out, they shut the gate, but of course they'd shut them in, right? You never want to shut the gate with the spies inside, right? It's like all this COVID lockdown. It only works to close borders if you've managed to keep the thing out. Before they were asleep, she came up to them on the roof and she said to them, I know the Lord has given you the land, and your terror has fallen upon us, and the inhabitants of the land have melted away because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea when you came out of Egypt, what you did to the two kings that were on the other side of the Jordan, Sichon and Og, who you completely destroyed. And as soon as we heard, our hearts melted, nor did there remain any more spirit in any man because of you. For the Lord, he is God in heaven above and on earth below. And now I pray, swear to me by the Lord, as I have showed you kindness, you'll also show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token. Basically, she asks that when they come into the land, that they should spare her family from death, basically. And we'll come to the answer in a minute. So interesting situation. So that question, we're talking about Tzaddikim yesterday morning and Rashayim. So Rahab, right? On the surface, she's an immoral person, right? On a deeper level, she's clearly a special person. First of all, she has about prophecy, but she has insight. Secondly, she believes in God. She expresses that belief. And thirdly, she basically helps them out. She's loyal, but she also happens to be a madam. So take your pick. So a couple of things. Before we come to her, we're not told their names. Why are we not told their names? Well, one suggested reason is that at the end of the day, they went to a brothel, basically, or at the very best, a dubious place. So although we know they went to spy, you can imagine people saying, oh yeah, that's their story. That's what they say. Everyone knows what happens over there. So one suggestion is to protect their good name. Their names are hinted at, interestingly, because when it says the names of the spies, it says, if we go back, he took two men to spy secretly, saying. So if you look at the Hebrew, it says in silence, and then it says Lamor saying, and I don't know which commentary says that who is a silencer. So if you go back to the original spies, it says Vayahas Kalev, that Kalev managed to silence everybody. He managed to calm them down. So it says it's an allusion to Kalev. And the other one is somebody who stood up and was counted we're told there's Pinchas. It's a very, very, very slight allusion, but we are told it was actually Kalev and Pinchas. So Kalev had already been through this before, so hopefully he would know all the pitfalls, and Pinchas was a very zealous individual who presumably could be relied upon to be at least loyal.
Or maybe it's because the original spies were all leaders.
Yes.
Princes,
Yes.
and this time around, maybe
Yes.
they weren't.
These are two
Just ordinary people.
somewhat ordinary guys. It's a different agenda as well. When Moshe sent the spies, we know that God didn't tell him to do it. God agreed to it, but he did it of his own back because the people were clamoring, and he initially thought it would be a good move. Joshua is actually told by God, I think. No, he's not. Sorry. No, he's not told to do it. No, he's not told to do it. No, that's number one. Number two, Moshe asked them to go and spy out the land. Joshua told them to go and see the land. It's a slightly different thing. He says, go and see the land in Jericho. Why does he say go and see it? Because I want you to observe and bring back information. When you go and spy, you're on a spying mission. We know what happened. They came back with their own spin on things. So he says to them, please, I just want you to go, just report what you see. I don't want you to spy. I don't want you to come up with a strategy. Just report what you see. Number one. Number two, he only sends 2 instead of 12. There's another difference as well. I can't remember what the difference was. I think what the 2 differences. Oh, the remit. He says, go look at Jericho. Go spy out Jericho, whereas Moshe said the whole land. The actual number of spies. Sorry, Joshua is commanded. I don't see where it says it here. Apparently it was commanded to do it by God. I don't actually see it there.
Maybe it's in chapter 1.
Maybe it's in chapter 1. And what happens? They go to this madam, it's Rahab. Now, it is said, verse 2, it says the king was told they were here. How did the king find out they were there? So we're not told that, but we're told that Rahab was quite a high-class escort, and that kings and leaders and sort of army generals and prime ministers and what have you would all patronize her services, which means that she had a lot of information, all that pillow talk, right? She was very well informed. So probably the reason she was able to give them this very military sounding assessment, not military, but this psychological assessment of everyone's state of mind is because she's bedding half, or she's at least responsible for the activities of large numbers of important people. So she's well connected, right? You have this, unfortunately, I'm sure to this very day, I'm trying to think of the lady in New York a few years ago. There was I don't know if they still use the word madam, but anyway, she was a madam basically. Can't think of her name, and she threatened to expose everybody, so it's a very powerful position to be in. So Rahab is in this position. She has probably the ear of certain leaders who patronize her services. So when she says people are very nervous, they're worried, they've seen what happened, she's probably saying it with good information. And nobody seems to say how they found out they were there, but I guess it's possible that there was some loose talk going on, if not from her, from probably some of her workers as well. It doesn't say explicitly, but actually it works out, because the whole thing becomes psychological warfare, because she tells them that, of course, that the people are afraid and so on and so forth. And from the other side as well, what would you think if your enemy, who you think is so powerful and so great and so scary, sends 2 little schnips to come and spy, and basically they're hanging out in a brothel? What would your first thought be in terms of morale? Probably they can't be as confident as we think they are if they're sending these chaps to spy the land, and they're doing it in such a kind of, like, why are they sending spies? They're obviously nervous. Right? If they were this big, huge army that's just going to come and mow us down, they wouldn't need to send spies. So there's a suggestion that the knowledge that they came actually would have created a false sense of security possible. Although Rahab says everyone's afraid of you, they've heard about you. From the other side, people say, oh, look, they're sending these little spies in. They're obviously not as confident as we think. They might create a false sense of security. Whatever the case may be, she's very key to all of this. She, of course, ends up hiding them. They don't know what happened to her in the end, according to the Gemara, by the way. She converted to Judaism, I believe the Gemara says. I think she may have married Joshua or Caleb, one of them. She became a very righteous person. Interestingly, anyone know what the Hebrew word for a prostitute is in the Bible? It's a kadesha. What do you think the root of that word is? Kadosh. How can that be? Right, so it's a nice euphemism. Oh, what a holy lady. It could be euphemistic. It's also because the word Kadosh, what does Kadosh mean? But what does that actually mean? It means basically distinctive and separate. So something holy is something that's way beyond everything else. So it can go the other way as well. Something unholy will be way below everything else. So you have the same thing in English. The classic one that's always used is the word cleave. What does cleave mean? Right, either mean to bond two things together or to break two things apart. The same word, meat cleaver, or to cleave to somebody. So kadeshah, the root is in kodesh and holiness, but it means the exact opposite. It means somebody who's extremely immoral and unholy. It's the word used for a prostitute, interestingly. It's a kadeshah. I don't know if it's used in modern Hebrew, probably not, but it was a kadeshah. When the Torah talks about, I'm trying to think. I think when Yehuda thinks that Tamar is a lady of the night, I think it uses the word Zonah. But a Kadesha is the old biblical word. So we see from all of this that we talk a lot about the 36 hidden tzaddikim in every generation. It's not necessarily, all the chief rabbis of the whole world or all the Hasidic rebbes. It's often some regular guy who's working in a corner shop somewhere. And there's all kinds of stories like that about people that said, oh, he was one of the hidden tzaddikim, or it was Elijah or something like that. So here you see a lady whose moral standards are questionable, whose profession is an old one, but a very questionable one, and yet who becomes a heroine, quite literally. Probably is instrumental in and ironically believes in God. Right? The Talmud speaks about the thief that has emunah in God, that prays to God for success before he goes on his mission. Right? So here's somebody, on the one hand, her behavior is immoral by all standards of all societies. Though let's be honest, it's happened throughout history. Without getting into the pros and cons of LGBT relationships, the phenomenon of non-traditional, shall we say, relationships is not a new thing. Sodom and Gomorrah, we're told there was all kinds of interesting things going on. So it's not a new phenomenon. I think the only difference in the world today is that it's become more mainstream and more accepted by societies that previously used to reject certain behaviors. But who are we kidding? Men have been particularly, I'm sure women to a much lesser degree, men have been visiting, paying for sex for as long as anyone can remember. When Yehuda thought Tamar was a Zonah, clearly that was something that was normal. Otherwise, why would he have thought it? He sees a lady standing at the crossroads. He assumes she's for hire. Clearly, it was normal. It's the oldest profession, and it's been happening since time immemorial. Doesn't make it moral, though, just because it happens. So it's not a very moral profession, especially since it breaks up families when people unfaithful and whatever. But on the other hand, she believes in God. She says, I believe in the God of Israel, who is going to redeem you. Which would you rather have? It's a bit like the Trump question. Lots of the religious community in America are falling over themselves. Trump is Mashiach. He's amazing. He's going to save the whole world, because he was quite pro-Israel and generally, took no nonsense from certain countries, and people liked him. So there was a bit of a backlash against that. A lot of the Rabbanim were saying, we know it says in Pirkei Avos that you should pray for the welfare of the government because you need the government. You don't want anarchy. On the other hand, it also says distance yourself from the government because they're self-serving. It never looks good to be too cozy and too sycophantic towards the ruling powers, and particularly something like that. His personal standards are extremely questionable. To have a president who is on record as basically molesting women pretty much is horrendous. And yet people overlook that because he was pro-Israel. So, which would you rather have? Somebody who has dubious moral standards, but has some kind of higher calling or purpose, believes in the God of Israel, or somebody who has high moral standards, but doesn't shelter you and hide you on the roof and so on. So in the long term, Rachav goes through a process, we're told in the Gemara, of Teshuvah. But at this point in time, the one doesn't negate the other. Her profession is definitely questionable. But everything is Beshet. So her profession here and what she does helps them enormously. A, because she's got information because of who she's sleeping with, and B, because she's able to hide them because she's influential. So everything is Beshet, and we can't question that. It works out well for them. But we don't endorse her, how she makes her living. So we'll just finish off chapter 2. So we've got, right, she says at the end, there is a self-serving aspect to this. She says at the end, she's already told us that told them that she recognizes that they're basically going to come and take over. And she basically says, I want you to treat me well. Now, this might sound obvious, but you have, of course, if you look at modern Israeli history, if you recall when Israel withdrew from South Lebanon, as far as I recall, they did not do right by the South Lebanon army. They basically left them. I know they allowed certain people asylum in Israel, but those who had been their allies were pretty much left out in the cold. It's happened in Afghanistan. I was just listening to something on Radio 4, it's horrendous, about female Afghan judges who obviously until the Taliban took over under the democratic constitution were sitting in court. Number one, not only have they been fired from their jobs, but then now basically all the men that they sentenced now feel that they can come around with impunity and probably try to murder them, and no one's protecting them. And that's just one facet. I'm sure there's many facets like that. It's a basic principle that, you know that when someone's going to invade your country, I think you can use the word invade, although God told them to conquer it, but they did ultimately invade the land initially, that you want them to be merciful to you if you've been loyal. So Rachav says, all I ask from you is that I've shown you kindness, show me kindness to my father's house, give me a true token, a true, pay me back, basically. What is that? Preserve alive my father, my mother, my brothers and sisters, all that they have, and you shall deliver our lives from death. The men answered her, our life for yours, if you will not tell this, our discussion. So basically, as long as you keep this to ourselves, of course, it shall be when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal with you with kindness and truth. She let them down by rope through the window, for her house was in the town wall, and she dwelt in the wall. She said to them, go to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you. Hide yourselves for 3 days. It's always 3 days. Everything's 3 days always, right? Until the pursuers return. Afterwards, you will go your way. The men said to her, we will be blameless of this, your oath, which you made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall bind this line of scarlet thread in the window by which you let us down. You shall bring your father and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household home to you. Right? So this is the scarlet thread. Basically, this will be a sign that it's your house, and we will basically know to rescue you. By the way, this may well be where the Kabbalistic connotation of red threads comes from. Anyone ever been offered a red string anywhere?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, at the Kotel.
Yeah.
Or, for some reason at Keva Rochel, they like to at Rachel's tomb. If anyone remembers, there was a TV program a number of years ago about the Kabbalah Center, and they then went to, I think it was Rachel's tomb. And there was a chap wandering around outside, and the whole thing was basically about how the Kabbalah Center is corrupt and it's basically fake, and it's a cult, and it's basically take your money and whatever. So I thought, oh no, now he's going to say 180 shekels or whatever. So they said, oh, thank you very much. What's this? He says it's a lucky charm, the red strings. I said, oh, how much is it? He says, no, I not charge you for this. So I thought that was good. I think that, do some brides wear red strings? Is there something with that? Yeah, red strings. So it could be, I don't know, but it could be this is where it comes from. The scarlet thread is a good segula, a good omen. Who knows? So that's what they said, basically, as long as you do your part. And he says, it shall be, whoever shall go out of the doors of your house outside, his blood shall be on his head, we will be blameless. Whoever shall be with you in the house, his blood shall be on your head, if any hand be upon him. So basically, stay indoors. And if you tell this discussion to anyone, we'll be blameless of your oath which you made us swear. Basically, keep it to yourself. And she said, according to your word, so be it. She sent them away and they departed. She bound the scarlet line in the window. And they went, came to the mountain and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. The pursuers were seeking them throughout, but they did not find them. Okay, so it's classic Middle East kind of tit for tat, but in a positive way, right? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Right? Was that her only motivation, that she saw the writing on the wall? The South Lebanon army or anyone else over the years that have been allies of Israel, are they Zionists or are they just pragmatists? So they were probably pragmatists. At the end of the day, you still put yourself at risk. She put herself at risk. I don't know, maybe she saw it as a strategic move, but the fact is she put herself at risk, and they said, fine, we will do as you ask, for sure. We'll recognize your loyalty and your kindness. And so their spying mission presumably was successful. We'll see next week. So any questions? We've done the first 2 chapters quite quickly. Any questions on that? Anyone?
If you do find the insights, the identities,
Well, we are told they were Kalev and Pinchas. I'm not sure where we're told that. We're definitely told that. I'm not sure where. Just to reiterate, the timescale of all of this is quick. We're told that one of the reasons this was done on the quiet is it was during the Shloshim for Moshe. They had to do it, which I suppose is an interesting lesson as well, that when you've got a battle to fight, it doesn't matter if it's Yom Kippur, you have to go out and do it. So they had to do it, but it was a very short timescale. It's basically a few days. And of course, they're going to enter the land shortly after that. So, none that's 40 years or, no built the ark for 100 years. Things happening quickly here. As far as I know, it's all within the same year, all within the same time frame. So a lot for them to take in, a lot of changes. Moshe has died, Joshua's taken over, they're mourning for Moshe. There's this spy mission going on in the background, and they're going to basically cross the Jordan as soon as they finish the mourning period, pretty much. The 3 days interesting. Avram took 3 days to get to the Akedah. There was 3 days preparation before the giving of the Torah. You have 3 days here. He gives the people 3 days to get ready for crossing the Jordan. I don't know what the significance of 3 days is in terms of what you can do in 3 days you can't do in 2 or 1 day. But 3 days we often find, for example, you're not supposed to go 3 days without hearing the Torah. That's why we read it Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos. So the only thing is it could be connected to 3 as a chazakah. When you have 3 of anything, we always say that gives it a certain permanence. But I don't know. So 3 days comes up quite a lot. So that's basically the cliffhanger. Is we'll see what happens when they enter the land next week, hopefully. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you for joining us. I hope the format worked again. Everyone okay here? You haven't got a stiff neck? Okay, and everyone see okay at home? Great. Okay, so the joys of modern technology. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, so have a good day, everyone.
And you?
Don't go trick-or-treating for a number of reasons.
No.
Not recommended. Right. Okay.